Hey guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube. So I want to talk about 5 more collecting categories that are losing steam and or losing ground in the overall antiques and collectibles trade. When I first launched this channel, I started doing these videos on a regular basis and they proved to be quite popular. And in several of my videos, I said I could make this series indefinite because the only constant in the antiques and collectibles trade is change. And this is something that unsophisticated speculators don't seem to realize. I've said this before, I'll say it again until I'm blue in the face. When a market goes from being speculative to established, that market changes. I don't care if we're talking about vintage comic books. I don't care even if we want to go back and we want to look at how collectible coins became a maturing market. That market went through many predictable and unpredictable cycles to get it to where it is today, where people are literally paying 10, 12, $15 million for coins at present time. I'm talking about the top 1% of the market in that dynamic, but people are paying that much for coins. And people don't realize that that market transformed throughout the decades, if not throughout the centuries, because people have been collecting coins, even US coins, for hundreds of years, and people don't realize this. So what I'm getting at is a lot of these markets are constantly evolving and changing as time goes on. Well, there are certain collecting categories that you need to avoid if you are collecting for investment, collecting for speculation, or any type of financial gain. Now, to be fair, before I get to this list, I always got to put a caveat. Certain parameters can change the fundamentals of these markets. For instance, I've said this about stamps. Stamps really in the last 5 to 10 years have been kind of dying out. Well, now, believe it or not, there are third-party grading companies that are coming into that market that is actually breathing a little bit of life in the stamp collecting category. I don't think at this point it's enough to cause a catalytic change in that market. But over time, over the next 3-5 years, I'm going to continue to monitor that market. And it could be that third-party grading is the breath of fresh air that the stamp collecting category needs to get back on track. Because over the years, stamps have been eclipsed by coins, by currency, by firearms, by historical documents. They have not kept caught up to those other mature collecting categories. Well, when we look at other collecting markets, one of the things you have to understand is at any time, a catalyst can come into these markets and fundamentally change them, at least for the short term, sometimes for the long term, but more often than not, it's for the short term. So what I'm going to state is when I go over this list, keep in mind, an unforeseen catalyst can come in and transform these markets. And if you're wondering what I mean by a catalyst, let's use this as an example. If you go back to the year 2000, vintage comic books were seen as in a market that was established, but that was starting to stabilize. Then CGC entered the marketplace as the premier third-party grading company right around 2001, 2002, and it changed that market fundamentally for the better. And that's why you have a lot of big money pouring into that market at present time. It's a couple of different events that are causing that market to evolve. The first was CGC with the advent of third-party grading, and the second advent was the spectacular handling of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and to a lesser extent, the DC Cinematic Universe. So those events caused a catalyst change in that market where now comic books can be seen in certain instances, guys. I'm not talking about your 1980s comic books or your 1990s comic books here, can be seen as serious investments. Now, what does this have to do with this list? Well, you just got to fundamentally understand that at any time, something could occur to change one of these markets. Now, ironically, the 5 markets that I'm going to go through with you today, I don't think are ever going to come back. They're not going to be something that all of a sudden is going to get a gust of popularity and collectors are going to rush into these markets. But one thing about the antiques and collectibles trade is I never say never. So first on the list is, believe it or not, vintage Barbie dolls and modern era Barbie dolls. Kids today, whether male or female, they're not gravitating towards traditional dolls and or on the male side of the equation, action figures. And this is something I really have to do a video on because a lot of people my age, I'm 43, we look back upon our youth And we remember Masters of the Universe. We remember G.I. Joe. We remember Transformers. We remember Star Wars. We remember Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And we automatically think that those brands are iconic, and kids growing up today are going to want to collect the toys from those genres and toy lines. Well, all the research is showing us is that kids born after the year 2000 are not gravitating towards action figures. They're gravitating towards video games, electronic devices, electronic toys, Lego, iPhones, iPads, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, PlayStation 5, all these other systems that are going to be coming out over the next few years. Action figures, toys, Barbie dolls have taken a back seat to a lot of these other popular products at present time. Now, to be fair, if you have an original first edition Barbie doll that came out in the late 1950s and it's in near mint condition or better, make no mistake, you have an investment grade holy grail piece. There's a lot of people that will pay a premium for that because that item had organic collectability. The stuff that Mattel was making in regards to the Barbie line in the 1980s, 1990s, with all the limited edition Barbie dolls, with the holiday Barbie dolls, and all this other stuff, that was mass-produced scarcity. So the people that bought into that stuff, if they were to go to sell today, they would lose a lot of money. This is not unlike the speculators out there that are buying Funko Pops, that are buying limited run video games, thinking that because a game only has 2,000 copies out there, it's going to be the next stadium events. I've done tons of videos on this, guys, by now. You should all know that's not really likely to occur. So if you are investing or if you love Barbie dolls, I have nothing against you. If you want to collect them, just know the investment element is very slim in that market going forward, unless you happen to be willing to pay out thousands of dollars to get a first edition Barbie doll that premiered in the 1950s in near mint condition or better. Next collecting category. This one's going to surprise a lot of you. Elvis memorabilia. Okay, guys, we have to have a candid conversation because we're now in the year 2020. Most people don't realize this, but the 1950s were literally 60-some years ago from this date and time. Elvis, much like the Beatles, hate to say it, it's going to happen, are not aging as well as they should. And I know in the comment section, there's going to be a lot of people disagreeing with me. No, Sean, I saw an episode of American Pickers, and they said Elvis memorabilia was the equivalent of blue chip stocks. Or, Sean, I'm going after Beatles memorabilia. You're not going to talk me out of it. This is the equivalent of blue chip collectibles. Well, first, I hate to tell you, but the term blue chip collectibles is an oxymoron. There's no such thing as a surefire investment in the antiques and collectibles marketplace. I don't care whether you're going after traditional antiques or you're going after modern era collectibles. Each one has risks. Those risks may be the same in certain cases. They may be different in other cases. But make no mistake, the Beatles, Elvis memorabilia, all the stuff from that era, especially in the rock category. We can even expand this to include Grateful Dead, Pink Floyd, a lot of these bands that came and went. Yes, right now, in certain instances, when we talk about Queen with the movie Bohemian Rhapsody that just came out a year or two back, that market right now is hitting its peak. But make no mistake, another 20, 30, 40 years from now, very few people are going to care about Elvis, the Beatles, Queen, and Pink Floyd. Yes, their music may be iconic. Don't get me wrong. Don't misconstrue. I agree with you there. But the problem is, collectors are born. They're not made. It takes collectors to go after these items, which causes then prices to increase on the secondary market. So if you don't have that demand there and you have supply, guess what's going to happen? Prices are going to fall. When a lot of these Elvis lovers start to die off over the next several years, over the next several decades, that merchandise is going to hit the market in mass, and it's going to start to plummet in value because supply is going to go up and demand's going to go down. There will be certain exceptions to this rule. For instance, the high end of the market, I'm talking the top 1% to 3% of Elvis memorabilia will always be collected. It's like Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe, the top 1% to 3% of that market of people that collect her memorabilia will always be iconic just for the fact that she was a starlet in Hollywood. And that matters going forward. But the bottom 97%, it's going to collapse at some point. It has to, guys. These markets mature and they change and they evolve. Third on my list, post-1980, let me say that again, post-1980 Coca-Cola memorabilia. Now, to be fair, if you look throughout my house and some of the rooms that I film in, I have very valuable vintage advertising devoted to Coca-Cola and other soda pop companies. The stuff that I have on my walls is from 1960 or earlier. For instance, upstairs in my living room, I have a framed tin Coca-Cola sign. That's from the 1930s. That sign alone is worth about $1,500 today. I paid about $600 for that back in 2010. The stuff that I'm referring to was produced en masse by the Coca-Cola Company and licensees after the year 1980. That's the stuff that is losing value on the market today because it goes back to the principle of mass-produced scarcity versus organic collectability. In the 1930s, even in the 1920s, if we go lower when Coke emerged back in the late 1800s, all the way up to about the 1960s, nobody thought to collect Coca-Cola merchandise as a quote-unquote investment. That's the stuff that became worth money today, that when you watch an episode of American Pickers, they're thrilled to find a Coke sign from 1948 or 1954. That's the valuable stuff. The stuff that's mass-produced after the year 1980, that was specifically licensed and released by the Coca-Cola Company, that stuff is pretty much worthless on the market today. Everybody bought it, everybody kept it near mint condition, and everybody kept it factory sealed. And that's a recipe for disaster. Again, it goes back to the concept of mass-produced scarcity versus organic collectability. The earlier stuff has organic collectability because nobody saved it as a collectible. Nobody thought it would be collectible. Next, collector plates. Back in the 1980s and 1990s specifically, right before the rise of eBay, companies like the Franklin Mint and the Bradford Exchange would produce all these different types of souvenir-based collector plates that were supposedly made in limited quantities or of a limited edition run. Some of these plates even featured the artwork of well-known American artist Norman Rockwell. Well, today, a lot of these pieces are pretty much worthless because nobody is investing in Franklin Mint collectibles or Bradford Exchange collectibles in the year 2020. Now, both these companies surprisingly still exist. They do feature limited edition, mass-produced scarce items that you can purchase through their respective websites or through their direct marketing. Sometimes you'll even get something in the mail that says, hey, we have this really rare Norman Rockwell-inspired train set that features his art, or a collector plate based on some American artist. This stuff, guys, is pretty much worthless as a collectible. Please do not buy it. I don't care the price point. You will take a loss. Even if you pay $1 or $2 for these items, if you go and look at completed auctions on eBay, 90% of this stuff is worthless. Don't touch it. Don't go near it. Don't collect it. Don't try to invest in it. And if you have a passion for it, I'm going to honestly state that you have tacky tastes at this point. This stuff died out in the 1990s for good reason. It was the wonderful dream of speculators where they could order this stuff month after month, and they would think in their mind that they were investing in something that would go up and up in value as collector demand grew. There is no organic collector demand for this stuff. There isn't going to be any going forward either. Avoid it. Last but not least, we got to talk about Thomas Kinkade. Now, a lot of you guys watch my videos that I've done on the high-end art market, contemporary art market, and every once in a while, someone will come in the comment section and they'll ask me about Thomas Kinkade. Here's the thing. In the 1990s, Thomas Kinkade rose to prominence as the so-called Christian painter of light. He did excellent, breathtaking landscapes of different sceneries, and he even set up retail shops around the United States till at one point they had over 300 stores that would feature his products. Well, here's the problem, guys. This again goes back to mass-produced scarcity. Thomas Kinkade paintings were mass-produced. A lot of the people that bought his stuff bought overpriced prints and related merchandise from these retail locations that would mark up the price of these items several hundred, if not several thousand% to unknowing buyers who thought they were buying an investment-grade item. Now, to be fair, there are people out there that have original portraits that were done by Thomas Kinkade. To a certain extent, those pieces, because they're one of a kind or of a true limited run, can be worth money on the secondary market today. But overall, 90 to 95% of Thomas Kinkade paintings, prints, merchandise, memorabilia, and products out there on the market today is worth close to 4 times less than what you were able to buy it for back in the 1990s. And some of it is completely worthless. So understand that when we talk about art, this is one of the traps you have to watch out for. Some of these artists that start to use mass-produced scarcity to their advantage to create items and merchandise that they can sell to unsophisticated investors and speculators. So again, the 5 collectibles, I'm going to go through them just as a quick recap. Barbie dolls, excluding the original 1950s first edition Barbie doll. Almost everything else is pretty much really losing steam on the collectibles market. Elvis memorabilia, and you can even put in there Beatles memorabilia, Grateful Dead to a lesser extent, Queen memorabilia, Pink Floyd memorabilia. All that stuff at some point is going to start to lose value. And ironically, if you look at the prices of Elvis memorabilia today, it's worth a lot less today than it was 10 years ago. If you want me to do a whole video on that, I can. Next category, post-1980 Coca-Cola memorabilia. Again, we're not talking about the vintage stuff. If you have an original near mint Coke sign from the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, that is an investment grade piece. Anything past that, though, you got to look at with caution, because that's when Coke collecting caught on and mass-produced scarcity took over. 4 is the collector plates. Avoid them like the plague. I don't care who made them. I don't care how cheap they are. Avoid them in most cases. Number 5, Thomas Kinkade artwork. So here you go, guys. Here's a list of 5 more collecting categories that are losing steam and or losing ground in the overall antiques and collectibles trade. I value your thoughts. I value your feedback. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. If you want me to expand on any more of these collecting categories, or if you want me to do more videos in this same vein, let me know that as well, so I know what resonates with my viewers and subscribers. Thanks for watching. If you do enjoy the content I produce, please consider subscribing to this channel. This channel has really grown exponentially in the last year compared to most other YouTube channels. I am thankful for all my continued support, all my viewers. A lot more great videos coming, along with some other surprises, so keep tuned. Thanks, guys.